Hey everyone, Richard Bass here from Thriving with Richard Bass. Today we're diving into a topic that causes so much confusion for parents: emotional meltdowns versus behavioral tantrums. How do you tell the difference, and why does it matter so much for how you respond? As a special education teacher for over a decade and author of several parenting books, I've seen thousands of children in distress. One of the biggest game changers for families I work with is understanding this crucial distinction. When you know whether your child is having a meltdown or a tantrum, you can respond in ways that actually help rather than accidentally making things worse. In the next 10 minutes, I'll walk you through the key differences between meltdowns and tantrums, share real examples from my classroom and the families I've worked with, and give you specific strategies for responding to each situation. Let's get started. First, let's talk about what's happening in your child's brain during these intense moments. Understanding the neuroscience helps everything else make sense. During a behavioral tantrum, your child's thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, is still online. They can still process information, make decisions, and respond to consequences. They're using emotional intensity as a strategy to get something they want or avoid something they don't want. During an emotional meltdown, however, your child's thinking brain has gone completely offline. Their emotional brain, the limbic system, has taken over due to overwhelming stress, sensory overload, or emotional intensity. In this state, they literally cannot think clearly, problem solve, or control their responses. This is why the same parenting strategy can work beautifully for a tantrum but completely backfire during a meltdown. Let me give you some real examples to illustrate this. Here's a tantrum scenario from my classroom. 7-year-old Emma wanted to continue playing with blocks when it was time to clean up. She threw herself on the floor, crying loudly and saying, "This isn't fair. I hate cleaning up, SA." But here's the key. When I calmly said, "Emma, you have two choices. You can put the blocks away now and earn extra computer time, or I can help you put them away and we'll try again tomorrow." She immediately stopped crying, weighed her options, and chose to clean up for the computer time reward. This was a tantrum. Emma's thinking brain was still working. She could process information, consider consequences, and make a rational decision. The emotional display was her attempt to change the outcome. Now here's a meltdown scenario with the same child. Later that week, Emma had missed lunch due to a field trip delay. The classroom was extra noisy and the lights seemed brighter than usual. When I asked her to transition to math, she completely fell apart. She was sobbing, couldn't form coherent words, and when I offered the same choices as before, she looked at me with genuine confusion, as if she couldn't understand what I was saying. This was a meltdown. Emma's nervous system was overwhelmed. Her thinking brain had shut down, and she needed support to regulate, not consequences or choices. So how can you tell the difference in the moment? Here are the key signs to look for. During a tantrum, children typically maintain some level of awareness and control. They might peek to see if you're watching their dramatic display. They can usually hear and respond to you, even if they pretend not to. They often escalate or de-escalate their intensity based on your response, and they typically stop relatively quickly when they realize the strategy isn't working or when they get what they want. During a meltdown, children appear genuinely overwhelmed and out of control. They're not performing for an audience. They seem unable to hear or process what you're saying. Their intensity doesn't change much based on your response, and they need time and support to gradually calm down even after any triggers are removed. Let me share another real example. I was working with a family whose 5-year-old Jake was having what they called terrible tantrums every evening. Mom described how Jake would scream, throw toys, and seem completely irrational. Traditional tantrum strategies like ignoring the behavior or offering choices weren't working at all. When I observed Jake during one of these episodes, I realized these weren't tantrums at all. They were meltdowns triggered by sensory overload and exhaustion after long days at preschool. Jake's nervous system was overwhelmed and he needed co-regulation and sensory support, not behavioral consequences. Once his parents understood this difference, they completely changed their approach. Instead of trying to reason with him or enforce consequences during these episodes, They dimmed the lights, offered a weighted blanket, and simply stayed near him with calm, reassuring voices. The intense episodes decreased dramatically in both frequency and duration. Now let's talk about how to respond effectively to each situation. For behavioral tantrums, your approach should be calm but firm. Stay consistent with boundaries and don't give in to demands made through emotional intensity. You can acknowledge feelings while maintaining limits. For example, I can see you're really upset about screen time ending. It's hard to stop doing something fun. The rule is still no more screens today, but let's find something else enjoyable to do. Offer choices when possible to give the child some control within your boundaries. You can walk to your room to calm down, or I can help you get there. Which would you prefer? And remember, don't take the emotional intensity personally. They're testing the boundary, not rejecting you as a person. For emotional meltdowns, your approach needs to be completely different. First, focus on safety. Make sure your child and others are physically safe. Then, lower the stimulation in the environment. Dim lights, reduce noise, remove crowds if possible. Offer your calm presence without demanding anything from them. You might say, I'm right here with you. You're safe. These big feelings will pass. Don't try to reason, teach lessons, or problem solve during the meltdown. Their thinking brain isn't available for learning right now. Use co-regulation techniques like slow, deep breathing they can mirror, gentle physical comfort if they want it, or simply staying nearby with a calm energy. Here's a crucial point. Sometimes what starts as a tantrum can escalate into a meltdown if the child becomes too overwhelmed. And sometimes what looks like a meltdown might actually be a tantrum with very intense emotions. The key is staying flexible and adjusting your response based on what you observe. Let me share one more example. 10-year-old Marcus started yelling at his mom because she said no to a sleepover. This began as a classic tantrum. He was arguing, negotiating, and trying different strategies to change her mind. But as the interaction continued and his frustration built, Marcus became genuinely overwhelmed. His arguing turned to sobbing. He couldn't seem to hear his mom's words, and his whole body was tense and shaking. Smart Mom recognized the shift from tantrum to meltdown. She stopped the conversation about the sleepover entirely and said, Marcus, I can see this is really hard right now. Let's take a break from talking about the sleepover. I'm going to make you some hot chocolate and we can just be together for a bit. She shifted from setting boundaries around the tantrum to providing support for the meltdown. Let's talk about some common mistakes parents make once they understand this difference. The first mistake is assuming all intense emotions are meltdowns. Some children do have tantrums with very big emotions, and they still need consistent boundaries, not just comfort. The second mistake is thinking meltdowns are manipulative. They're not. Meltdowns are genuine neurological overwhelm, even if they happen at inconvenient times or seem to be triggered by not getting something the child wants. Another mistake is trying to prevent all meltdowns. While we can reduce triggers and build coping skills, some meltdowns are part of normal development, especially during times of stress, growth, or change. And finally, don't forget that meltdowns can look different for different children. Some children become very loud and physically active during meltdowns. Others might shut down, become very quiet, or seem to space out. Both are valid stress responses. Here are some specific strategies for each type of situation. For tantrum prevention, make sure basic needs are met. Hungry, tired, or overwhelmed children are more likely to use emotional strategies to get needs met. Establish clear, consistent expectations so children know what to expect, and teach emotional vocabulary and coping skills during calm moments, not during the tantrum itself. For meltdown prevention, learn your child's stress signals and environmental triggers. Create predictable routines that support regulation. Build in sensory breaks and downtime, especially for sensitive children. And remember that some days will just be harder than others. During tantrums, stay calm and don't take it personally. Acknowledge feelings, but don't negotiate boundaries during the emotional storm. Wait for calm before problem solving or discussing what happened. And follow through consistently so children learn that tantrums don't change outcomes. During meltdowns, prioritize connection and co-regulation over correction. Remove or reduce overwhelming stimuli when possible. Avoid talking too much or asking questions. Offer physical comfort like hugs or weighted blankets if your child finds them soothing, and give them time and space to recover after the intensity passes. Here's something really important to understand. Both tantrums and meltdowns serve important developmental purposes. Tantrums help children practice emotional expression and learn about boundaries. Meltdowns help release overwhelming stress and teach children that they can survive big emotions with support. The goal isn't to eliminate either one completely, but to respond in ways that support your child's development and strengthen your relationship. Let me share one final story that really illustrates this. I worked with a family who had twin boys, age 6. One twin had frequent tantrums, the other had frequent meltdowns. The parents were exhausted because nothing seemed to work consistently. Once we identified which child was having which type of episode, everything changed. For the child with tantrums, they implemented consistent consequences and refused to negotiate during emotional outbursts. For the child with meltdowns, they focused on environmental modifications, sensory support, and co-regulation. Within a month, both children were having fewer intense episodes, and the parents felt confident in their responses. Same family, same values, but completely different strategies based on understanding what each child actually needed. Remember, you know your child best. While these guidelines are helpful, trust your instincts about what your child needs in any given moment. Some children need more co-regulation support even during tantrums. Others might need firmer boundaries even when they seem overwhelmed. The key is staying curious rather than reactive. Ask yourself, what is my child communicating through this behavior? What do they need from me right now? How can I support them while still maintaining appropriate expectations? Understanding the difference between meltdowns and tantrums isn't just about managing difficult moments. It's about building a deeper understanding of your child's inner world and responding in ways that support their emotional development. When children feel understood and supported during their most difficult moments, they develop trust in themselves and in you. They learn that big emotions are manageable, that they can count on you for support, and that they're loved even when they're struggling. That's all for today. If you found this helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to Thriving with Richard Bass. Drop a comment below sharing your experiences. Have you noticed differences between your child's meltdowns and tantrums? What strategies have worked best for your family? I read every comment and often use your questions for future video topics. See you in the next video.